My wife Vivian was gone. We had just returned from laying her to rest under the shade of a Georgia oak tree, the scent of magnolias still clinging to my suit. Now gathered in the cold, sterile boardroom of the company I built from dirt and dreams, my daughter-in-law Jessica smiled a predator's smile. Now that the old woman is gone, she said, her voice like chipping ice, "You'll put the company in my son's name and fend for yourself." I didn't flinch. I just smiled back. They thought my grief had made me weak. What they didn't know was that Vivian's final gift to me wasn't in her will, it was in a secret box. And the lawyer about to walk through that door wasn't just bringing documents. He was bringing the results of a DNA test that would burn their entire world to the ground. Before I continue, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And please hit that like and subscribe button if you believe a legacy is something you earn, not something you can steal. The silence in the company boardroom was heavier than the Atlanta humidity in August. We'd come straight from the funeral, the somber quiet of the cemetery replaced by this thick, expectant stillness. I sat at the head of the long mahogany table, my hands resting on the cool, polished wood. On the walls around me, framed photos of completed projects, gleaming skyscrapers, sturdy bridges, community centers filled with smiling children told the story of my life's work. Vance and Sons Construction. Today, the and Sons part felt like a cruel joke. My eyes kept drifting to the empty leather chair to my right, Vivian's chair. For 40 years, she had sat there during every major decision, a silent partner whose wisdom was more valuable than any consultant I could hire. She had a way of just looking at me, a slight narrowing of her eyes that meant be careful, or a soft, almost imperceptible nod that meant trust your gut. I could feel the void of her absence now, like a physical weight, a cold spot in the air-conditioned room. I missed her glance more than I missed breathing. Across from me, Jessica sat ramrod straight, her blonde hair pulled back in a bun so tight it looked painful. She wore a severe black pantsuit that probably cost more than my first car, her lips painted a blood red. She offered a practiced, sympathetic smile that never reached her cold blue eyes. Beside her, my son Marcus stared down at the table, his shoulders slumped. He traced the wood grain with his finger, refusing to meet my gaze. He was a man of 48, but in the presence of his wife, he became a boy always looking for her approval, always waiting for his next line. And then there was my grandson, Liam. 21 years old, slumped in his chair, his thumbs flying across his phone screen under the table, a picture of entitled boredom. He hadn't shed a single tear at his grandmother's funeral. He'd seemed more annoyed that it had interfered with his weekend plans. They weren't here to mourn, they were here to collect. I could see it in the way Jessica's eyes scanned the room, not with sadness, but with the cold calculation of an appraiser. I had seen this coming, of course. In the final months of Vivian's illness, their visits had become shorter, their questions less about her comfort and more about company accounts and property deeds. They saw a dying woman not as a mother and grandmother, but as an obstacle. And they saw me as the aging gatekeeper to their inheritance. They were waiting for me to speak, to break, to give in. So I waited too. I let the silence stretch, letting it become their enemy, not mine. Finally, Jessica cleared her throat, the small sound echoing in the tense quiet. "Samuel," she began, her voice dripping with a false sweetness that set my teeth on edge. "We know how incredibly difficult this is for you. Vivian's passing is a tremendous loss for all of us." She paused as if expecting someone to agree. No one did, but the company needs to move forward. The board is getting anxious. It's time for you to rest. She slid a thick folder across the table. It made a soft hissing sound as it traveled over the polished wood, coming to a stop directly in front of me. "These are the transfer documents. It's all very straightforward. You'll sign over your controlling shares and the CEO position to Marcus. We've also drafted a motion to give Liam a seat on the board upon his graduation. It's the best way to ensure the family legacy is secure." Marcus finally looked up, his eyes pleading. "Dad," he mumbled, clearing his throat to sound more forceful. "It's the right thing to do. It's what Mom would have wanted." I held my son's gaze. For a fleeting second, I saw the boy I used to know, the one who followed me around construction sites with a little yellow hard hat. But he was gone, replaced by this stranger. "Are you sure that's what your mother would have wanted, son?" My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. A smirk played on Jessica's lips. She leaned forward, abandoning all pretense of compassion. Her voice was a blade. Now that the old woman is gone, she said, her words clear and precise. "You will sign the papers, put the company in my son's name, and fend for yourself. You're old. Stop being a burden to us." The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. They weren't just asking for the company. They were trying to erase me, to cast me aside like a broken tool. I felt a cold calm settle over me. There was no rage, no shock. There was only a profound, clarifying certainty. Vivian had seen this. She had known this would happen. I looked at their expectant, greedy faces, and I smiled. It was a small smile, barely a twitch of my lips, but it was real, and it terrified them. The confidence in Jessica's eyes wavered. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "All right," I said, my voice smooth and even. I reached out and placed my hand on the folder, but I didn't open it. "But before we do anything, I believe we need to hear a few things from my attorney." Jessica's face tightened. A flicker of confusion, then alarm. "An attorney, Samuel, this is a private family matter." I looked from her face to my son's and then to the empty chair beside me. I felt Vivian's strength flow into me. "No," I said, my voice steady and clear for everyone to hear. "It never was." My smile faded the moment the boardroom door clicked shut behind them. The echo of Jessica's venom still hung in the air, a toxic residue. But my mind wasn't on her threats. It was 3 days earlier in the suffocating quiet of my own home. After the funeral, after the last well-wisher had departed, I found myself in Vivian's study. It was the one room I hadn't been able to face. It still smelled like her, a faint, comforting mix of old books and lavender. The afternoon sun streamed through the window, illuminating swirling motes of dust, each one a tiny forgotten world. I wasn't cleaning, not really. I was just touching things. Running my hand over the worn leather of her favorite armchair, tracing the titles on the spines of her poetry books, trying to feel her presence in the things she had loved. Grief is a disorienting thing. It makes you clumsy. I reached for a heavy volume of architecture theory on a low shelf, and my knee knocked against the side of her old wooden desk. The book tumbled to the floor with a heavy thud. As I bent to pick it up, my eyes caught something. A slight misalignment. A floorboard right under the desk that wasn't quite flush with the others. I'd walked over this spot 1,000 times and never noticed. But today, in the stillness and the slanted light, it seemed to scream at me. My heart began to beat a little faster. I knelt down, my old knees protesting, and pressed my fingers against the edge of the plank. It was loose. I worked my fingernails into the seam and lifted. The wood came away with a soft groan of protest, revealing a small, dark cavity beneath. And nestled inside was a simple, unadorned cedar box. It was no bigger than a shoebox, and it felt heavy in my hands, heavy with the weight of secrets. It wasn't locked. I lifted the lid, my breath catching in my throat. The scent of cedar and thyme wafted up to meet me. Inside, resting on a bed of faded velvet, were 3 things. A single perfect lock of baby hair, dark and fine, as spun silk tied with a pale blue ribbon. A yellowed hospital birth certificate, the name Samuel Vance, Jr., typed neatly on the line for the child's name. And beneath them, a thick sealed envelope made of heavy cream-colored paper. My name, Samuel, was written on the front in Vivian's elegant, familiar script. My hands trembled as I picked it up. This was a place of ghosts. I broke the wax seal and unfolded the pages within. The letter began, "My dearest Samuel, my love, my only love. If you are reading this, then I am gone, and I have left you with one last terrible burden." My eyes scanned the page, the words blurring through a film of sudden tears. "I need to tell you a truth I was too cowardly to speak in life. A truth I have carried alone in my heart for 48 years. Please, my love, find it in your heart to forgive me for my silence." "The boy we brought home from the hospital," she wrote, "the boy we named Marcus, the boy we raised and loved, was not the son I gave birth to. Our son, our Samuel Jr., was born with a weakness in his lungs. He lived for only 6 hours. The doctors told me he was gone while you were down the hall making the phone calls to our joyful, unsuspecting family. The pain. Samuel, there are no words for that pain. I thought my world had ended." From the room next to mine, I could hear another baby crying, strong and healthy. A nurse, a kind woman named Clara, came to me. She told me the baby belonged to a young, terrified girl who had no one who was going to give him up. And in a moment of madness of grief so profound it shattered all reason, she offered me a choice. She said we could switch the records, that I could take home a healthy boy, that you would never have to know the pain of losing our son. I know it was wrong, the letter continued, but in that moment, all I could think of was you, of your face when I would have to tell you our son was gone. I couldn't bear it, so I said yes. We came home with Marcus, and I loved him, Samuel. I swear to you I loved him as my own. Every scraped knee, every sleepless night, every proud moment, that love was real. I kept the secret because I was afraid the truth would break, you would break us. But I was a fool. I built our family on a foundation of lies, and now the cracks are beginning to show. The tone of her writing shifted, then the elegant script becoming sharper, more urgent. I see the woman our son married. I see the greed in her eyes. She is a vulture, Samuel, and she has taught our son to be one too. She has twisted his love into entitlement, his respect into impatience. They look at you and they do not see a father. They see an obstacle. They will try to take everything we built, not to nurture it, but to consume it. I cannot protect you anymore from the outside, my love, so I am giving you the truth from the past. This secret was once my shame, but now it must be your shield. Forgive me. Forgive me for the lifetime of deception, but please do not let them destroy our legacy. Protect what is ours. Protect what is yours. I let the pages fall into my lap. The world tilted on its axis. 48 years. My son was not my son. The grief for Vivian mixed with a new hollowed-out sorrow for the baby I never knew I'd lost, and for the woman who had carried that impossible secret alone for our entire marriage. The box on the floor was no longer just a box. It was a testament to her love, her fear, and her final desperate plan to save me. The pain was immense, but beneath it something else began to grow. Not anger. Not yet. It was a cold, hard resolve. She had given me my instructions. She had asked me to protect our legacy, and I would not fail her. I sat there on the floor of my wife's study for what felt like an eternity, the letter resting in my lap. The world I knew had been dismantled in the space of a few hundred words. Every memory of raising my son was now cast in a different, more complicated light. The grief for Vivian was a raw, open wound, but now it was joined by a new, strange sorrow for the secret she had carried alone. For a moment I felt the weight of it all pressing down, threatening to crush me. I could just let it happen. I could sign Jessica's papers, retreat into the fog of old age, and let the legacy Vivian and I built be devoured. But then I looked at her handwriting at the final desperate plea on the page. Protect what is ours. It was a command from the grave, and I knew I could not do it alone. There was only one person on earth I could trust with this. I pulled my phone from my pocket, my fingers feeling stiff and clumsy as I found the name David Chen. He answered on the second ring, his voice warm with concern. Samuel, I was just about to call you. How are you holding up? He was my lawyer. Yes, but he had been my friend first. He and his wife had been to our home for countless dinners. He had known Vivian for 30 years. David, I said, and my own voice sounded foreign to me, thin and cracked. I need you. Can you talk? The warmth in his voice immediately sharpened into professional focus. Of course. What is it? Is it Marcus and Jessica? Are they pushing you already? He knew them well. Worse, I said. I took a deep, shuddering breath. David, I found something. A letter. From Vivian. I heard him take a sharp breath on the other end of the line. I didn't read him the whole letter. I couldn't. Instead, I gave him the devastating core of it. She wrote that our son, Samuel Jr., died at the hospital. The day he was born. The silence on the other end of the phone was absolute. I could picture him in his office, looking out over the Atlanta skyline, his mind reeling. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft with disbelief and a profound sadness. My God, Samuel. And Marcus. He's not mine, David. He's not our son. Vivian. She made a choice. In the middle of all that pain, she made a choice. I explained the story of the switch, the words feeling like ash in my mouth. For a long moment, David was the friend. He mourned with me. That incredible woman, he whispered. The weight she must have carried all these years. To protect you, to build a family. Samuel, I am so sorry. But then I heard him take a deep breath, and the gears shifted. The friend stepped back, and the lawyer I had relied on for 3 decades stepped forward. His voice became firm, clear, and strategic. Vivian was an extraordinary woman, Samuel, he said, his tone now edged with steel. And she was smarter than all of us. This letter isn't just a confession. She was arming you. She gave you a way out. Now we have to use it. Hope, cold and clear, cut through my grief. He was right. This was not an ending. It was a battle plan. What do we do? I asked. Jessica will fight this. She'll say it's the ramblings of a sick woman, a forgery. She'll certainly try. David replied, a hint of grim satisfaction in his voice. Which is why the letter is our map, not our weapon. Our weapon has to be irrefutable science. We need a DNA test, Samuel. A legally admissible one. I asked how we could possibly manage that without raising suspicion. Leave it to me, David said. Hospital records are kept for decades. Marcus had his tonsils out when he was 8. I'm willing to bet the hospital still has tissue samples archived. We can get a court order for that and use your own medical records as a baseline. It will be clean, quiet, and undeniable. The plan was taking shape, a path forward through the wreckage. And the other part, I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Her real son. I'll hire a private investigator first thing in the morning, David said without hesitation. The best. Someone who specializes in finding people who don't want to be found. Vivian gave us a date, a hospital, and the circumstances of the birth mother. It's a needle in a haystack after almost 50 years, but it's not an empty haystack. We can find him, Samuel. By the time I hung up the phone, the world felt different again. The grief was still there, a permanent resident in my heart. But the crushing weight of helplessness was gone. It had been replaced by a cold, hard purpose. Vivian had not left me alone. She had left me a shield, a sword, and a trusted general to help me wield them. My next meeting with Jessica and Marcus would not be a surrender. It would be an ambush. I just needed to let them walk a little deeper into the trap. After the call with David, my grief felt different. It was still a vast, empty space inside me, but now it had a purpose. It was no longer just a weight, but a weapon I was learning to wield. The next day, I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I drove out to our biggest active construction site on the south side of the city. I needed to feel the ground shake with the rumble of heavy machinery. I needed the sharp smell of cut lumber and wet concrete, the symphony of saws and hammers. This was the world I understood. This was the legacy Vivian had urged me to protect. I didn't go to the project manager's trailer. I just walked the site, my old work boots feeling natural on the uneven, muddy ground. I needed to see the bones of the building to remember what it was all for. That's when I saw him, Elijah Hayes. He was standing in the middle of a heated discussion with 2 contractors, both of them twice his age and a good 50 pounds heavier. There was a problem with a shipment of steel beams, the wrong gauge delivered, threatening to throw the whole schedule off by a week. It was a situation ripe for a shouting match, for blame to be thrown around like scrap metal. But Elijah wasn't shouting, he was listening. He had the blueprints unrolled on the hood of a dusty pickup truck, his finger tracing the specifications. He was calm, his voice even but firm. He wasn't accusing the contractors, he was walking them through the problem, pointing to the order form, then to the beams on the flatbed truck. I watched from a distance as he treated them not as adversaries, but as partners in solving a problem. He spoke with a quiet authority that had nothing to do with his title and everything to do with his competence. He knew his stuff inside and out. After a few more minutes of tense negotiation, he proposed a solution, rerouting a different shipment from another one of our sites to cover the immediate need while the supplier corrected their mistake. It was smart, efficient, and it allowed the contractors to save face. As the 2 older men walked away grumbling but ultimately agreeing, Elijah turned to one of the nearby foremen. "Hey, Mike," he said, his whole demeanor softening. "How did your daughter's piano recital go?" The foreman grinned. "She nailed it, boss. Thanks for asking." That was Elijah. He saw the work, but he also saw the people. In that moment, the contrast between him and my own son was a physical pain in my chest. I thought of Marcus, who would have delegated the problem to someone else, or worse, thrown a tantrum and threatened legal action, alienating everyone. I walked over as Elijah was rolling up the blueprints. He saw me, and his face broke into a respectful smile. "Mr. Vance, I didn't know you were coming out today. I needed to smell some sawdust, son," I said, clapping him on the shoulder. "I saw how you handled that. That was good work." He just nodded, a little embarrassed by the praise. "They're good men. Just a supplier mistake. We'll make up the time." We talked for a few minutes about the project, about timelines and budgets. Then I asked him about the affordable housing wing of the complex, the part of the project that the board at Jessica's urging had tried to cut. "How is that part coming along?" His eyes lit up. The professional competence was replaced by a pure, unbridled passion. "It's incredible, Mr. Vance. We're using those new composite framing materials you approved. It's cutting our costs by 15% without sacrificing an ounce of structural integrity. That's 15% we can pour back into better insulation and community green space. These families, they're not just getting a cheap apartment, they're getting a quality home, a place to build a life. As he spoke, my mind drifted back. I remembered the day I hired him fresh out of Georgia Tech, a skinny kid in a suit that was a little too big for him, but his portfolio was brilliant and his eyes had a fire in them. I saw myself in that fire. He didn't just want to build buildings, he wanted to build communities. It was the same dream I'd had when I laid the first foundation for this company, a dream Marcus, with his talk of profit margins and luxury upgrades, had never understood. I had mentored Elijah, watched him grow, and felt a quiet paternal pride in the man he was becoming. I just never understood why I felt it more strongly for him than for my own son. Now, standing here in the Georgia sun with Vivian's letter, feeling like it was burned into my memory, I finally knew. I put my hand on his shoulder again, my grip firm. He stopped talking and looked at me, a question in his eyes. "You've got a good heart, Elijah," I said, my voice thick with an emotion I couldn't name. "In this business that's rarer than a perfect cost estimate, don't ever lose that." He looked taken aback, then deeply moved. "Thank you, sir," he said. That means the world to me." I gave his shoulder a final squeeze and walked away, my boots leaving deep prints in the red clay. I knew then that I wasn't just fighting for a company. I was fighting for an ideal, and I had just looked its future right in the eye. My last words. It never was, hung in the air between us, a declaration of war. Jessica's face, a moment ago so confident and cruel, was now a mask of confusion and dawning fury. Her perfectly painted lips parted, then pressed into a thin, hard line. She looked at me as if seeing me for the first time, not as a feeble old man to be managed, but as an opponent she had fatally underestimated. Marcus, true to form, looked from his wife's face to mine, his expression a pathetic mix of fear and bewilderment. Even Liam, my grandson, had finally looked up from his phone, his bored detachment replaced by a flicker of genuine curiosity. He could sense the shift in the room's atmosphere, the sudden drop in temperature. They were all waiting for my next move, expecting me to produce some document to make some feeble argument. But the next move wasn't mine to make. It belonged to Vivian. Right on cue, the heavy oak door to the boardroom swung silently open. It hadn't been a knock. It had been the quiet, confident turn of a doorknob. David Chen stepped inside. He was dressed in an impeccably tailored gray suit, his silver-streaked hair neatly combed. In his hand he carried a well-worn leather briefcase that I knew had held the secrets of my company for the last 30 years. He closed the door behind him with a soft, definitive click. His eyes, calm and steady, swept the room, taking in the scene with the practiced efficiency of a man who has walked into 100 battles. He gave me a brief, almost imperceptible nod, a silent signal that the plan was in motion. Jessica was the first to find her voice, and she wielded it like a weapon, trying to regain control of the room she thought was hers. "Mr. Chen," she said, her tone sharp and dismissive. "What an unexpected surprise. As I was just explaining to Samuel, this is a private meeting. A family matter. Your services are not required." She was trying to frame him as an intruder, an unwelcome outsider meddling in affairs that were above his station. She was drawing a line in the sand, putting him back in his place as nothing more than a hired employee. David didn't even flinch. He walked slowly, deliberately toward the table, his gaze fixed on Jessica. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His quiet authority filled the space, pushing back against her shrillness. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Vance," he said, his voice as cool and smooth as river stones. He stopped beside the empty chair that had been my wife's, placing a hand on the back of it for just a moment. It was a small gesture, but a powerful one. He was aligning himself with Vivian. "I am here today not at the request of Mr. Samuel Vance, but in my official capacity as the executor of the last will and testament of my late client, Mrs. Vivian Vance." He let the name hang in the air, a potent reminder of the woman whose absence had created this power vacuum. He was making it clear that the authority he held came directly from her. "So you see," he continued, his eyes locking with hers, "while this may be a family matter to you, it is a legal and fiduciary duty to me. And I can assure you my presence here is not just necessary, it is non-negotiable." He then walked to the head of the table near me and placed his briefcase on the mahogany surface. It landed with a solid, definitive thud that seemed to suck all the remaining air out of the room. The polished leather seemed to absorb the light, a dark and ominous object that held all of our futures inside it. For a moment, nobody moved. The only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioning. Then, with slow, deliberate movements, David rested his hands on the briefcase. His fingers found the two brass latches on the front. In the dead silence of that boardroom, the sound of him flicking them open was brutally loud. A sharp metallic click-clack. It sounded like a judge's gavel. It sounded like a weapon being cocked. He lifted the lid, revealing neat stacks of files and documents within. Then he looked up, his calm, unreadable gaze sweeping over Jessica, then Marcus, and finally me. The ambush was set. The trial was about to begin. David ignored her outburst completely. His movements were calm, deliberate, each one designed to command the room's full attention. From his briefcase, he retrieved a document, not a single page, but a small portfolio bound in a simple, elegant blue folder. Vivian's favorite color. He placed it gently in the center of the table, as if it were a sacred text. And in that moment, it was. That simple blue folder held more power than all the money Jessica had ever schemed, for more authority than any title she could ever demand for her husband or son. It was Vivian's final move, her voice from beyond the silence. This, David announced, his voice cutting through the tense atmosphere, is the final and legally binding will and testament of Vivian Vance. It was drafted, signed, and witnessed 6 months ago. He let that fact sink in. 6 months. This was not the product of a grief-addled mind or a last-minute whim. This was a calculated, strategic decision made with a clear and prescient mind. Jessica let out a short, brittle laugh. It was a sound of pure derision meant to belittle the moment, to reassert her dominance. "Oh, please, David, don't be so dramatic," she sneered, waving a dismissive hand. "We all know what her will says. It's tied to the old family trust. Everything is divided according to the established plan. Marcus gets his controlling shares, and as his spouse, my future is secured. Samuel is provided for. It's all been arranged for years. This is just a sentimental formality." I watched her, and I felt a profound sense of pity mixed with my cold resolve. She was so certain of her victory. She saw this document as a mere speed bump on the road to her ultimate goal, a piece of paper that held no real power over the plans she had so carefully laid. She was so busy looking at the throne she believed was hers that she failed to see the trapdoor beneath her feet. She had always underestimated Vivian, and she was about to learn how fatal that mistake was. David looked at her, his expression unreadable. "You are mistaken, Mrs. Vance," he said simply. The words were quiet, but they landed with the force of a gavel. He then reached into his jacket pocket and retrieved a pair of slim, black-framed reading glasses. He put them on with a slow, deliberate motion, a professor preparing to lecture a particularly dull student. The room was utterly silent as he opened the blue folder. He began to read. "I, Vivian Vance, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament." His voice was formal, but as he continued, it softened. The first section was not about assets or property. It was a letter to me. To my beloved husband, Samuel. David read, and I felt Vivian's presence fill the room. "You were the architect of my joy, the foundation of my life. With you I built a home not of wood and steel, but of love, laughter, and unwavering partnership. For 49 years, you were my compass and my anchor. I leave you with my unending love, the only true asset that can never be appraised, divided, or diminished by time. Please know, whatever comes next, that every choice I ever made was to protect the beautiful world we built together." I closed my eyes for a moment, the words washing over me. It was her final gift, a reinforcement of our bond read aloud in front of those who had tried so hard to tear it apart. I could feel Jessica's impatience radiating across the table. To her, this was just sentimental nonsense, a waste of precious time. Then David cleared his throat. His voice shifted, losing its warmth and taking on a sharp, clinical edge. "Now," he said, looking over the rim of his glasses, "regarding the disposition of tangible and intangible assets." Jessica leaned forward slightly, her eyes gleaming. This was the part she had been waiting for. David read slowly, giving each word its full, devastating weight. "All my personal assets, including but not limited to real estate investment portfolios and personal effects, along with all my shares in Vance & Sons Construction and all associated voting rights, shall be transferred in their entirety to my beloved husband, Samuel Vance." He paused for a single perfect beat. I saw a flicker of triumph in Jessica's eyes. She thought she had won, that the will simply consolidated power, with me making her takeover of my assets the next logical step. David continued, his voice dropping slightly, "to my direct bloodline, heir, should one be identified." Silence. It was a heavy, suffocating thing. Marcus stared at David, his brow furrowed in confusion. Jessica's triumphant smirk wavered, replaced by a look of cautious suspicion. Direct bloodline heir, she repeated, testing the words on her tongue. What kind of strange wording is that? It's just archaic legal jargon. Obviously it refers to Marcus. She looked at her husband, who nodded dumbly in agreement. Right, Marcus said, his voice weak. That's me. I'm her direct bloodline. They didn't see it. They were so blinded by their own entitlement, so certain of their place in the universe, that they couldn't see the precision of the dagger Vivian had so carefully crafted. They thought it was a shield for them, when in fact it was a sword aimed directly at their hearts. David took off his glasses, folding them carefully and placing them on the table. He looked directly at Jessica, his face a mask of professional neutrality. That he said, his voice now quiet and dangerous, is precisely the point that requires clarification. He reached back into his now open briefcase. He didn't pull out another file. He pulled out a single sealed 9x12 envelope from a certified genetics lab. At the written request of Mrs. Vance, stipulated in a separate legal directive executed on the same day as the will, and with the full authorization and cooperation of Mr. Samuel Vance, my firm was instructed to engage a third-party laboratory to conduct a thorough genealogical analysis. This was to legally and scientifically identify the beneficiary as explicitly defined by the term direct bloodline heir. He slid the heavy envelope onto the table. It sat there between us, a white rectangle of truth in a room full of lies. It looked like a time bomb. David let her accusation hang in the air, giving it no oxygen to burn. His focus was entirely on the task at hand. His actions were so precise, so deliberate, they felt like a ritual. From his briefcase he retrieved a silver letter opener. He slid the blade cleanly under the flap of the heavy lab envelope. The sound of the paper tearing was sharp and final, the only sound in a world that had suddenly gone silent. Everyone in the room, even Liam, was frozen, their eyes fixed on that simple manila envelope as if it contained the secrets of the universe. In a way, it contained the secret of ours. David reached inside and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It wasn't a dramatic scroll, just a standard clinical-looking lab report filled with technical language and columns of data. An impersonal scientific document about to deliver the most personal and devastating of truths. He put his reading glasses back on a small, familiar gesture that now seemed unbearably theatrical. He scanned the document for a moment, his face impassive. Then he looked up over the tops of his glasses, his gaze settling first on Marcus, then on Jessica. He let the silence stretch for one last agonizing second. When he spoke, his voice was flat, devoid of all emotion. It was the voice of a man stating a simple, unchangeable fact. Pursuant to the side-by-side analysis of genetic markers from sample A identified as Samuel Vance and sample B identified as Marcus Vance, he read the conclusion of the genealogical assessment is as follows. He paused, and I could hear the frantic pounding of my own heart. The probability of the subject Marcus Vance being the biological son of the subject Samuel Vance is 0.0%. The words dropped into the silent room like stones into a perfectly still lake. For a single breathless moment, nothing happened. There was only the ringing in my ears, the echo of that final impossible phrase, 0.0. Then the shattering began. It wasn't loud at first. It was Marcus. The color drained from his face, leaving it a sickly grayish white. His jaw went slack. He started shaking his head, a slow, disbelieving motion at first, then faster, more violently, as if he could physically dislodge the truth. No. He whispered, the sound a strangled gasp. No. That's impossible. It's a lie. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a desperate, childish plea. Mom would never... His voice broke. His entire world, every memory, every birthday, every moment of his life had just been fractured. The foundation of his identity had turned to dust beneath him. While Marcus imploded, Jessica exploded. A guttural, furious sound ripped from her throat. She shot out of her chair so fast it scraped loudly against the floor. Her face, a moment ago a mask of smug certainty, was now twisted into a snarl of pure rage. Her perfectly manicured finger jabbed through the air, aimed directly at me. "You did this!" she shrieked, her voice shrill and ugly. "This is your sick little trick. You forged this. You couldn't stand to see us take over, so you invent this disgusting lie, you cowardly, evil old bastard." The venom washed over me, but it didn't touch me. I remained perfectly still, a rock in the torrent of her fury. I was the silent observer watching the scene play out exactly as David and I had anticipated. This was the predictable chaos of a cornered predator. This was the tantrum of a thief who had just been caught. David, equally calm, let her tirade rage for a few moments, letting her exhaust the initial burst of hysteria. Then, with the calm precision of a surgeon, he cut through her noise. He ignored her completely. His attention was on the truly wounded person in the room. He reached for the simple blue folder that still lay on the table, the one containing Vivian's letter. With a quiet, fluid motion, he slid it across the polished surface of the table. It glided over the wood and came to a stop directly in front of Marcus's trembling hands. David then looked at me, but he spoke loudly enough for the entire room to hear. His voice was quiet, yet it silenced Jessica's screaming instantly. "Your son might want to read this," he said. "It's an explanation. From his mother." Jessica's rage sputtered out into a string of incoherent, venomous whispers. She had no more ammunition. Her threats were empty, her accusations powerless against the cold, hard science on the page in front of her. All her focus, all her energy now turned to Marcus, urging him to deny it, to fight. But he couldn't. He was hunched over the blue folder, his shoulders shaking with silent, racking sobs as he read his mother's final words. He was no longer a co-conspirator. He was just a broken man, mourning a life he never knew he had, and a mother he now understood he never truly knew at all. David let the tragic scene breathe for a moment, allowing the full weight of Vivian's confession to settle into the room. Then, with the air of a man bringing his final arguments to a close, he straightened his tie. His voice cut through the quiet, sobbing calm and inexorable as a rising tide. He wasn't speaking to Jessica or Marcus anymore. He was simply stating the final legal facts of the matter for the record. As I stated, he began, his voice clear and unwavering. The will of Mrs. Vivian Vance is explicit. Her assets, her legacy, and her controlling shares in this company are to be passed to her direct bloodline heir. He glanced at Marcus with a brief professional sympathy. As DNA has proven that Marcus Vance is not a biological relation, he is legally excluded from this specific and primary inheritance clause. I saw a flicker of something in Jessica's eyes, a desperate final calculation. If Marcus wasn't the heir, then surely the inheritance would fall back into a general family trust, one she could still fight for, still litigate for years. She was already formulating a new plan, a new battle, but she hadn't understood the depth of Vivian's strategy. David continued, anticipating her thoughts. The will further stipulates, he said, letting the words hang in the air, that in such a case the entire inheritance should then pass to the biological heir, should one be identified. He let the conditional phrase linger, a final cruel twist of the knife for Jessica. The implication was clear: if the true heir was lost to time, she might still have a chance. He then slowly, deliberately turned his head and looked toward the boardroom door. "And we have identified him." As if summoned by an unseen force, the doorknob turned. The heavy oak door swung open once more. Standing in the doorway, looking utterly bewildered but with a straight-backed, quiet dignity, was Elijah Hayes. He was still in his work clothes, a simple collared shirt with the Vance & Sons logo embroidered over the heart, his boots clean but clearly worn from the grit and dust of the construction site. He had been pulled from the world of steel and concrete into this maelstrom of greed and broken hearts. His eyes darted around the room, taking in Jessica's tear-streaked, hate-filled face, Marcus's collapsed form, and finally settling on me, a question mark in his gaze. David's voice rang out formal and clear, a proclamation that sealed their fate forever. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, though there was nothing gentle about the moment, "allow me to introduce Elijah Hayes, the biological son of Samuel and Vivian Vance." A new kind of silence fell over the room. Not tense, not angry, but a deep, profound, and utter stillness of shock. Jessica and Marcus stared at Elijah as if he were a ghost. He wasn't just a person to them. He was the living, breathing embodiment of everything they had just lost. He was an impossibility made real, a specter from a past they never knew existed, who had just walked in to claim their future. David provided the final, irrefutable details. Our private investigation following the leads left by Mrs. Vance located Mr. Hayes last month. We were also able to locate the personal diaries of his birth mother. In them, she detailed the circumstances of his birth and subsequent adoption, all of which has been cross-referenced and legally verified. That was it. The final lock clicked into place. The trap was sprung. I pushed my chair back from the table, the scraping sound loud in the dead quiet. I stood up feeling taller and stronger than I had in years. All eyes, including Elijah's, turned to me. I didn't look at Jessica. I didn't look at the weeping man who I had called son for 48 years. My eyes were only for Elijah. In the strong line of his jaw, in the kind intelligence of his eyes, I saw her. I saw Vivian. I saw the son I never knew I had. I walked around the long table, each step closing a gap of 5 decades. I stopped directly in front of him, this good, decent young man who I had admired from afar, this man who shared my blood and my passion. I put my hands on his shoulders. "Hello, son," I said, and my voice was full of a lifetime of loss and a future of hope. "I've been waiting a very long time for you." My words meant for Elijah alone were the spark that ignited the final inferno. For Jessica, the sight of me placing my hands on Elijah's shoulders, of claiming him, was the one thing her mind could not tolerate. The last vestige of her icy control shattered, and the raw, ugly greed beneath was laid bare for all to see. A sound that was half scream, half sob, tore from her throat. Her face, a moment ago pale with shock, was now blotchy and red with a furious primal rage. "No," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "You can't. You think you can just do this. You think you can replace your son, replace your family with this nobody." She took a step towards Elijah, her hands curled into claws, but David subtly moved to stand between them. "He's a fraud, a con artist. And you," she whirled her finger, jabbing at me again, "you are a pathetic old man, so twisted by grief you'd rather burn down your own family than admit you've lost control. I'll sue you. I'll sue you for everything. I'll tell the world what you've done." Her threats were meaningless, the desperate thrashing of a drowning woman. And as I watched her, I realized she had not once looked at her husband. Not once had she shown a flicker of compassion for the man who was weeping at the table, his entire life revealed as a lie. Her only concern was for the power and the money that had just slipped through her fingers. She wasn't fighting for her husband or her family. She was fighting for her bank account. Marcus was oblivious to her tirade. He was in his own private hell, his face buried in his hands, his shoulders shaking. The pages of Vivian's letter were crumpled in his fist. The sound of his heartbroken sobs was the only genuine thing left on his side of the table. He was not a villain in that moment. He was just a casualty, a boy of 48 who had just lost both his parents all over again. Seeing that the situation was beyond reason, David quietly took out his cell phone and pressed a single button, a pre-arranged call to building security. While we waited, he spoke one last time, his voice cutting cleanly through Jessica's continued screaming. He addressed his words to Marcus, though I doubt the man heard him. "The will does make one final provision," David said calmly. Out of what she described as a mother's lingering affection, Vivian stipulated that a modest monthly stipend be made available to Marcus Vance from a private trust. It's enough to live on, but not in luxury. This, however, is conditional upon his enrollment in psychological counseling and a legally binding agreement to have no contact with either Mr. Samuel Vance or Mr. Elijah Hayes. David then looked directly at Jessica, his eyes cold. "The will makes no provision for non-relations by marriage in this event. You, Mrs. Vance, are entitled to absolutely nothing." That was when the security guards arrived. 2 large, impassive men in professional uniforms. Their presence was a silent, unarguable statement that this was all over. Jessica seemed to finally realize it too. She screamed a long final wail of pure defeat as they gently but firmly took her by the arms. She continued to shout threats and curses as they escorted her from the room. Marcus didn't even look up. He allowed himself to be helped to his feet, a hollow, shuffling wreck of a man guided out of the boardroom and out of my life. In the sudden ringing silence that followed their exit, I looked around the room. The table was a mess of discarded documents and overturned water glasses. It was then that I noticed it. Liam's chair was empty. He hadn't been escorted out. He had simply vanished. He must have slipped away the second he understood that the money was gone. No dramatic exit, no final confrontation. Just the quiet, cowardly retreat of a boy who had only ever been loyal to his inheritance. It was the saddest, most honest thing any of them had done all day. The door clicked shut, and the storm was finally over. The click of the boardroom door closing was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It was a sound of finality, an end to a war I hadn't even known I was fighting until a few days ago. The ghosts of greed and anger had been exorcised, leaving behind a silence that was not empty but peaceful. It was a clean silence, a space to begin again. David walked over and placed a hand on my shoulder, his grip firm and steady. "It's done, Samuel," he said quietly. "Vivian would be proud." I knotted my throat too thick with emotion to speak. He gave my shoulder a final squeeze, then looked between me and Elijah. With the tact of a true friend, he knew this was a moment we needed to have alone. "I'll go file the preliminary paperwork," he said, giving us both a small, reassuring smile before gathering his things and letting himself out. And then there were two. We stood in the quiet room, a father and a son separated by 5 decades of secrets and strangers to each other. The awkwardness was a tangible thing. "What do you say? Where do you even begin?" It was Elijah who spoke first. His voice hesitant, full of a disbelief that matched my own. "Mr. Vance, I don't know what to say." I turned to face him fully, and for the first time I let myself truly see him. I saw the kindness in his eyes, the strength in his posture, and a faint echo of my wife's smile that nearly brought me to my knees. "Neither do I, son," I said, my voice gentle. "Why don't we start with our names? I'm Samuel." He told me about his life. He spoke of his adoptive parents, a kind couple who gave him a good home but who had passed away years ago. He told me about growing up seeing the Vance and Sons logo on construction sites all over the city, a symbol of strength and permanence in his ever-changing world. He confessed that he'd always felt an inexplicable pull towards the company, an admiration for the unseen man who built things that lasted. When I applied for the job, he said, a look of wonder on his face. It felt different. Not like just getting a job. It felt like I was coming home, I just didn't know why. I listened, and I felt the invisible threads of fate, of a mother's love, of a destiny that had been set in motion so long ago, pulling this good young man towards me even when I didn't know he existed. It was a miracle, plain and simple. I knew then that I didn't want to burden him with the weight of instant family. I didn't need him to call me father. I needed him to understand what we were truly fighting for. "Elijah," I said, my voice steady, "your mother's legacy and mine. It's not just about money or this building or a title on a door. It's about building things that matter, things that last. It's in the heart of a home where a family feels safe. It's in the strength of a bridge that connects a community." I looked him straight in the eye. "I have seen that same builder's heart in you since the day you first walked into my office. Would you like to help me keep building?" A slow smile spread across his face, and in it, I saw all the hope for the future. "Yes, sir," he said, his voice full of a quiet, powerful conviction. "Yes, Samuel, I would be honored." I walked to the great window that overlooked the city, a tapestry of buildings stretching to the horizon, so many of them having risen from the dust under my watch. Elijah came and stood beside me. We looked out at the skyline together. For a moment, I said, speaking more to myself than to him, I thought this was all about justice. But it's not. It's about forgiveness. Forgiving Vivian for carrying such a heavy secret all those years just to protect me, and forgiving myself for being too blind to see the real son who was standing right in front of me all along. My legacy was safe now, not because it had been passed to my bloodline, but because it had been passed to a man who shared my spirit. Vivian's will had been a map, and it had led us here. It was never just about the blood. It was about the heart. In the reflection in the glass, I saw an old man and a young man standing side by side. A past full of secrets had finally found its peace, and a future I never thought I'd have was just beginning to be built. This story teaches us that the most valuable inheritance is not money or a company, but a legacy of integrity and purpose. While greed and disrespect ultimately lead to ruin, a person's true worth is proven by their actions and the goodness in their heart, a bond that is ultimately stronger than blood itself. If you believe a true legacy is built on character, not just bloodlines, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories. Let us know in the comments below, what does the word legacy truly mean to you?